welcome to the painting course. I'm Jeremiah Polachek, your pilot on your passionate painting journey that you've embarked upon. We're in lesson 2 of the first theme, which is back to basics, oil painting basics. And in this series, I'm just gonna hammer away at all the fundamentals of oil painting itself. Last class, we made some gradients and learned a little bit about dry brush blending and how to blend different values together and create some nice gradients. This week, we're gonna start put some big white fluffy clouds on top of those gradients that we made. And we're going to learn about edges and the different types of edges that exist not only in clouds, but in a variety of other subjects as well. And that's going to be about hard edges and soft edges, when we should use some soft edges, when we should use hard edges. So let's get into it and let's start painting. Now let's take a look at some clouds and see the difference in edges that are present within them. If we zoom into this cloud here, we can see that there's different types of edges. One is a hard edge and one is a soft edge. So the hard edge would be this white up against the blue. There's not a lot of blurriness or blending going on between those two colors. A soft edge is going to be between this type of a gray and the whiter, lighter color. There's a lot of soft edges in here too. Another thing that's kind of interesting about clouds is that they're a lot like fractals. So when we see a big thing like this, when we zoom into it, often we see little miniature versions of the big cloud. It's just kind of an interesting thing about clouds themselves. So we can imagine that there's these two different types of edges. There's one that's really hard, white up against blue, and then there's the softer blended edges. And when we're thinking about these blended edges, we can just go back to last assignment and when we were doing those gradients and dry brush blending in order to create stuff like that. Now, if we're going to look at a painter who painted clouds, a great person to look at is John Constable. And John Constable did a bunch of cloud studies in the middle of the, probably around 1830s or so. And he did all these cloud studies. I just think they're really interesting to look at. And we can zoom into these as well to see this type of a hard edge here and this type of a soft edge here. And we can also see, look at all the variation that's occurring even in this area that's just supposed to be lighter. It's like the sky, basically. So even in those areas, there's still a lot of gradations happening. Look at all these darks. We might think of that just as one big area of dark, but when we get into it, look at all the variation that's happening in value here. Another thing that's interesting to look at, we can take a look and see what the differences in the color spectrum that's being used. So let's take a look at some color temperature differences that are occurring as well. If we go back to this image, this photograph of a cloud, I've just got the eyedropper tool here. And let's select here, and this shadow is going to be a little bit cooler. See, that's in the blue spectrum of colors. And then let's go to one of these areas, and this is going to be a little bit warmer. Immediately, this is put in a warmer spectrum of colors as well. So we're going to start off our cloud paintings with some cooler colors. That just means that there's more blue in it, more or less. And then we're going to use our highlights. We're going to do a little bit warmer colors as well. A lot of times people think, oh, I'm just going to mix up a value scale from this dark to this light and everything will be good because I've got lighter stuff here and darker stuff here. But there's also a color temperature change that happens in clouds as well that you can see from these blues here to these creamy orange whites up there. So it's also emulated here in the John Constable painting. You can see some subtle differences. Even look in the shadows here. He brought some of those warms into his shadows just to give them a little bit more vibrance and a little bit more play within those two tones. So we can look at this painting and kind of use it as a guide and just see how John Constable was putting clouds up against each other. But more importantly, we're learning the concept of edges. So we're not learning how to paint clouds, even though you will learn how to paint a cloud. But mainly we're learning about edges, and we can apply edges to a variety of other paintings. Here you can see I've made it really, really clear what is a hard edge and what is a soft edge. This is another John Constable painting, as a study as well of clouds. And look at all the variation from the coolness here. Look at this cool blue up there. and then as you get down towards the bottom of the painting, it's really, really quite warm. And most people wouldn't even imagine that's a sky color he has there. Look how he's treating the sky. There's not even a lot of blue. There's just a little hint of blue there, a little hint of blue there. So we're also learning about color temperature, and we're learning about the edges. We look at this edge, here again, hard edge, here again, soft edge. Those are the two types of edges that we got to master when we're creating our clouds, and that's going to give them depth and make them structural if we start using those two types of edges. Now, I just wanted to point out that edges exist in painting all the time. This is a David Park painting. So when we look at this woman, there's also the same interplay between hard edge and soft edge. Here we can see a really, really hard edge where her hair meets her forehead area. But then look at this hand. This is pretty hard, but this is actually pretty soft. You know, so we're still seeing a lot of interplay between these hard edges and soft edges. Look at this big area that's just supposed to be orange. When we get into and really see it, we see all these kind of scumbled areas, and this is another way of just kind of breaking that edge down. He didn't make this like a rectangle that's sideways. He purposely knocked down that edge to make it feel a little bit softer. So this exists in a lot of different type of painting. Look at the shadows here. Look at the variation in the shadow colors down here. Look at all that variation in color. Look at how soft all these edges are. That's like a shadow. Shadows are soft. That well, not all shadows are soft, but this would be a soft shadow cast by this light. And then look at the hard edge of that book right there. It's the same thing, same ideas. All of painting is about dealing with edges. You're not dealing with lines like in drawing, but dealing with edges. Where do big areas of value collide with other big areas of value? Now, we could take this and look at somebody who's a photorealist as well. Here's a Richard Estes painting, and the same ideas are here as well. He's a very uses a lot of hard edges in this painting. But let's zoom into this a little bit as well. And you can also see some of these areas are actually softened down edges, and he's actually making softened edges by just these subtle value shifts. You can barely see them when you're zoomed out, right? It just looks like it's going around the edge there, but when you get up close, they're just very, very subtle changes in value. But of course, he's also got gradients down in here. You know, there's bigger gradients here in the sidewalk, but there's a lot of hard edges happening as well. Some more softer, more playful edges down in this area. But look at this window, completely hard edge. This is completely hard edge, but then soft in the building again. So these types of edges exist in all different types of painting, but we're going to use the cloud paintings to learn and apply how to use edges. And clouds are a great format for it because you can't really screw up a cloud too badly, and it gives you some time and space to get used to materials and paint and just blend without any worry. This doesn't look like an antelope, right? Or whatever you're trying to paint. You're just making a cloud. And if it's too blobby in one area, it's not a big deal. So let's get into it. This painting will be using Pthalo Blue, Cadmium Red Medium, Cadmium Yellow Light, and Titanium White. So the first thing you're going to want to do is create a dark color which is darker than your sky. And we're going to do that just by mixing Pthalo Blue and Cad Red Medium there. We're going to get a deep purple color. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow in that to take it more down in intensity. Now we'll watch this go up, and we've got a middle gray color. And in these cloud paintings, we're going to be using a lot of cool colors and warm colors. And cool colors and warm colors, that just refers to color temperature, but generally it just means having more blue or having more red in a color. But colors with more red in them feel a little bit warmer, colors without feel a little bit cooler. We got a gray mixed up. Let's see what it looks like on the canvas. This looks like about the darkest dark that's present in the photograph, so that'll be good for some sketching colors and to begin with. Back to my palette, I'm going to mix up another gray which is a little bit lighter. And that's going to allow me to sketch a little bit more freely and not worry so much. So I haven't thinned my colors out at all, and I'm just going to squint at my image, and I'm going to start looking for those main contours that are present in the image, and just lightly start outlining them. Contours basically mean lines where there's shadows, lines where there's highlights, the edge of a cloud up against the sky. A few other things to remember are that clouds are bigger towards the top and they get littler as you go towards the horizon. So that's going to help you get that sort of depth. And basically right now we're just drawing, and we know that we're looking at the shadows, where they lie. And with clouds we can also make a lot of stuff up. Doesn't have to be an exact replica of what you see, but looking at the real world is going to help inform your painting a lot. Doesn't mean you have to copy something like a cloud exactly like it is in the photo. Now let's start thinking about where are bigger areas of shadow. I'm just going to lightly move my brush like that to start indicating some shadows. At this stage, I'm basically just drawing, seeing where there's dark areas, seeing where there's lighter areas. We get towards the horizon line, these shapes are going to get smaller and smaller as they get towards the horizon line. Keep things really loose at this stage. Think about the structure of these clouds. Back to the palette, let's mix up another color which is even lighter. This color is also going to be really cool. We don't have to think about any of the warms yet, but we're also not doing the highlights yet. Look at your photograph, and now you can start thinking about this one is in front of this one, and this has a shadow right here. So I'm going to start laying in these values. It can be a little bit harder because we have this background color, but just act like that background color is white. And so now this cloud is behind this cloud. This is going to happen in a lot of different places. This is in front of this. So we can also make these shapes as well. Think about where your light's coming from. My light's coming this way. So all these areas are going to be lighter, these areas are going to be a little bit darker, then these are going to be lighter, then darker, then lighter, then darker. So everything kind of follows the same pattern throughout your whole image. And now, just continue on and fill in these shapes and the next value. You can just continue on with the dark values, working yourself a little bit lighter. and fill in those big value shapes. Just get those grays in. We're still just working only with cool colors at this point. And think about the basic structure of your cloud, but also start to feel how you can manipulate the paint. Now that I'm moving on to the next color, I'm just going to clean my brush, and we're going to mix up some warm highlights. And start by just mixing up an orange color, Cad Red and Cad Yellow. I'm just going to mix up some orange, and then I'm going to clean my brush. Now I'm going to take some white, I'm going to put it there. And now we got a nice lighter orange, kind of creamy highlight color. Watch how these warms and these cools just glow next to each other when we start placing them next to each other. We want to get a little bit of that vibration of this cool color hitting that warm color there. Now we can just start cutting areas out with our new light color we're bringing in. And we can decide this is a hard edge here, and this is a soft edge that blends from this purplish color to this orange. This is a hard edge where that orange light color collides right with that dark shadow. See where these two meet? We're going to darken that edge a little bit just because we don't want our shadows to get flat. We want our shadows to also convey depth. We don't want them to just be flat. So I'm going to just darken that a little bit and give an illusion that this shadow is also a gradient. And that makes this pop forward a little bit more too. There's a lot of variance in these darks. Gonna come back with a little bit lighter color. Just get that edge a little bit more. Hard edge, soft edge. Blend one side out, keep one edge hard. Repeat. You can see on my palette, I've got a dark and some gradations going up on the value scale here, and I've got this orange and these two different highlight colors, a little bit whiter, a little bit more orangey. And we're just going to continue on with the rest of the clouds now, not getting into too much of the darks, but we're just going to look for this value and then our highlight value. You don't want to go too light right off the bat, and just start working in that next lighter color with some of this orange. Don't worry about it too much. You can always go on top of the orange later and manipulate the color temperature and the value. Here you can see I'm just lightly putting in a little bit of white, and we can think about those spheres that are also going to be where we just paint spheres and triangles and squares and these sort of things. But just think of your clouds as being composed of these sort of really simple different elements as you're painting. Here we're just continuing to lighten up some of those darker values, getting into the horizon area as well. Things are going to get a lot lighter in general as they get to the horizon for a couple of reasons. One of them is just simply atmospheric perspective, and that's just the idea that as things go farther back in space, there's a little bit of water vapor in the air, and this water vapor makes stuff a little bit bluer and a little bit more blurry and foggy. So as we get towards the horizon, we're going to have a little bit less value contrast in the darks and lights. They're going to get a little bit more washed out, and the colors are going to get a little bit cooler as well. Oftentimes when you look at the horizon line, if it's even a slightly cloudy day, you'll notice that the horizon and where the horizon and the sky meet, many times it'll be just almost white completely. So that's another thing to take in consideration as you get down towards that horizon line. I just chose to put a little bit of a green line there to signify some landscape. So stick around, you can watch the unsped up version of this after this video ends. And if you like this sort of thing, head on over to paintingcourse.com and start the class today. We're going to continue on with this series, and then next week we'll have a brand new theme. Thanks for watching. So I haven't thinned my colors out at all, and I'm just going to squint at my image, and I'm going to start looking for those main contours that are present in the image, and just lightly start outlining them. Contours basically mean lines where there's shadows, lines where there's highlights, the edge of a cloud up against the sky. A few other things to remember are that clouds are bigger towards the top, and they get littler as you go towards the horizon. So that's going to help you get that sort of depth. And basically right now we're just drawing, and we know that we're looking at the shadows, where they lie. And with clouds, we can also make a lot of stuff up. Doesn't have to be an exact replica of what you see, but looking at the real world is going to help inform your painting a lot. Doesn't mean you have to copy something like a cloud exactly like it is in the photo. Now let's start thinking about where are bigger areas of shadow. I'm just going to lightly move my brush like that to start indicating some shadows. At this stage, I'm basically just drawing, seeing where there's dark areas, seeing where there's lighter areas. Now, as we get towards the horizon line, these shapes are going to get smaller and smaller as they get towards the horizon line. Hmm.